know you also talk to young boys about pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Difficult topics like relationships and sex. And these are things that I think in the wider world, sex education when I grew up was a very basic thing, and it's so great to hear the kind of what's available now to young people. But there's also on the other side is that there's, because of the internet, the internet may sound so old, just because of the so much information that's available to them, right? There's also kind of the other side of what they start to believe through, whether it's pornography and whether it's kind of stories from other people of like what sex should be. So I guess a question that's come into my mind is, when you're working with young men, young boys, what is the perception they have of what sex is?
So one way I like to establish this in the room or a session, in terms of what they think sex is, one is by asking them. So I say, what is sex? And then someone might give me a very kind of textbook answer. It's about like intercourse and genitalia and so. Then other kids might start listing different activities and all this sort of stuff. And then on the board, you can imagine what the whiteboard looks like, So I'll ask that, and then that gives me a general idea of kind of who's, if I'm really honest, when I'm working with older kids like 18 plus, like who's had sex, because those are the ones that don't get excited about the topic. And I also ask, who is sex for? And you get a lot of answers which are like, me. Like, who's supposed to enjoy it? And like, me, it's for me. And then someone that might be in a relationship would be like, actually, sex is for I tend to be the person, especially when I work with younger people, like, sex is for everyone that's having the sex to enjoy it. And they're like, oh, okay, interesting, sir. And so something that, kids struggle with sometimes is this idea of, if they think of themselves as the person that's doing the acts. And what I mean by that is that sometimes, I've had arguments or disagreements or debates with boys about the type of girl they would want to be with, right? And they're like, yeah, so I couldn't be with a girl that like goes to a lot of like house parties and like, sleeps with guys at those things, or whatever. Like, that's not me. And I'm like, cool. So do you go to house parties? And they're like, yeah, obviously I'll go to house parties. And it's that thing of, oh, have you ever slept with someone at a house party? And again, it's me speaking 18 plus kids, because on a grey area, I work with second year students and in college and sixth forms. So just so they've got that emotional maturity and like that more life experience. And it's like, oh, have you or a friend ever like had sex with someone at a house party? They're like, yeah, of course, sir. And I'm like, so you are, in your eyes, allowed to do these things, and that makes you desirable as a young man. However, for your person that you want to be with and spend time with in a romantic relationship, you're like, she cannot do those things. And I'm like, the only constant here is you and your decisions, because their decisions aren't necessarily changing, right? But you're allowed to like go in these worlds of undesirable and desirable, but you only want the person for you that's desirable, but you're not doing the things yourself to make yourself seem desirable. And then like eventually sometimes you get a kid that's really thinking, it's like, why does it matter? Why does the past matter? Like, if you're in a relationship with someone now. And I'm like, yeah, you're really thinking, like, that's where we're going eventually. One day we're gonna get there. Because I don't want it to come off as like, oh, some big respectability thing. I'm just like, no, like, the boys are separating themselves from the things they're doing when they're imagining their life. And I'm like, actually, your life is here, your life is now, your life is the things you already have done and what you can do going forward. The same for your potential partners. So it's not fair to you're writing girls off for doing the same things you've done, but you're also asking them not to write you off. It's like big contradiction. So yeah, in terms of relationships, I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, again, through like online influences, big respectability kind of issues, and yeah, kids thinking sex is like this act that they do or they get more than anything, as opposed to being about a relationship. I always say to kids, like, or young people, the relationship it can be one night, it can be 1 year. Like, that relationships can still have effective communication, care, honesty, all these sorts of things, right? it's about your values as a person, if you're living up to those values or not. But yeah, kids, especially when you're talking about year nines about things like sex, they're like, oh my, they just go kind of crazy. And yeah, a lot of them are unfortunately watching a lot of pornography, and that is their education. When it comes to relationships, their education's a bit more wider. It might be at home, might be for some of their friends might be in relationships, as well as like TV and media. And one thing I always think is that there's a lot more education around consent, which is great. But when kids are in relationships, that might be the first time in their lives as teenagers where they can set the rules, and they can live by or break the rules, and they can, I guess, kind of push their boundaries and stuff. And I think it's really important that kids have not just a good understanding of consent, but a good understanding of communication, of respect, of emotional well-being, because consent is what is informed by all of those things, as opposed to just being about yes, no, maybe. It's about how you treat another person, how you treat yourself. And I think, if young people, when they're first getting into relationships, it's the first time they're on this like equal playing field. Whereas everything else before is like adults above them being understanding they're below them. I think in relationships, it's their first time kind of navigating something as what should be as an equal. Doesn't always happen, but yeah.
Yeah, as you say, that it's like the first time of their kind of co-creating an entity together with somebody else in the way that they want that entity to be, what they want it to look like, how they want to feel. And I guess that's a real, if that's for the first time for two people, it's really informed by a lot of the existing kind of beliefs they have about themselves, their worth, their ability to speak up for themselves and so forth. And it can be both a really enlightening place, I imagine, for them, because they get to be maybe treated with value and they never experienced that before, or they get to speak up for what they want and have that perspective, maybe something they've never had before. And it gets to be a really good learning ground. But it also, I guess, is another place for those kind of beliefs and wounds to just continue to kind of play out with someone who may not be very skilled at noticing that's what's happening.
Absolutely. And unfortunately for kids, they're going to bring into a relationship the same thing that adults bring into a relationship, which is their past. And, I think, unfortunately, I had a lot of experience of, kids disclosing to me about the harm that they're experiencing in their relationship, because, and when you dig a bit deeper, you're like, oh, this person's home environment is it's no surprise that this is what's happening in a relationship, if considering that's the home life of or past life of a child as well. And yeah, I don't know if kids always think about, I think anyone really, adults, we always think about the goods, or people always think about the goods when they're getting into something, as opposed to like how to navigate the bad. And I think with work I do with boys and stuff, and the reason why I get them to do these things that they think are hard is to help them build that resilience to navigate difficulty, because they're going to do that. They're going to need those skills for the rest of their lives. And otherwise, they can go down very, I guess, destructive paths instead. And that's not what I want.